Most towns die quietly. The gold runs out, the cannery closes, the railroad reroutes. People pack what they can carry and leave behind what they cannot. In a century of boom and bust settlements across North America, this is the standard script. Ghost towns fill history books and postcard racks. We call them relics. We photograph them. We are not afraid of them. Portlock, Alaska did not follow that script. Portlock was driven out, not by economics, not by weather, not by government policy, by something waiting in the timber above the bay, something that tore apart men, sabotaged equipment, left behind tracks no known animal makes, and ultimately convinced an entire working community that staying meant dying. This was not treated as folklore by the people who fled that bay. It was treated as memory. Some places are abandoned for reasons that do not appear on any official record. To understand what happened at Portlock, you need to understand what it was before the fear took it. Roughly 16 miles south of Seldovia, on the windward edge of the Kenai Peninsula, the bay known as Port Chatham offered something rare in southern Alaska, the cold shelter of the inlet itself. Named for Captain Nathaniel Portlock, who anchored there in 1786, the settlement that grew around the bay became a hard-working settlement built around a cannery, a chromite mine, and a productive salmon fishery. At its height, Portlock supported a United States post office, a territorial boarding school, and the kind of ordinary life that demands endurance from everyone living it. It sat on land with deep roots. The Sugpiaq and Alutiiq people had known this coastline for generations before any cannery was built. They knew the forests pressing down from the mountains above the bay. They knew the fogs that could erase a beach in 20 minutes, and they knew what lived in the high timber. They called it the Nantiinaq. Even by Alaskan standards, Portlock was isolated. Reaching it meant bushplain or open water. The surrounding terrain, steep timber, mountain ground, and tidal inlets compressed the settlement against the bay. You could feel watch there long before seeing anything at all. The trouble did not begin in the 1940s, when the final evacuations happened. It began earlier, in smaller ways. In 1905, all of the cannery workers put down their tools and left. They could not describe what was bothering the camp. They had no name for it, and no clear sighting to report. Only a feeling, deep, unanimous, and strong enough to walk away from their livelihoods over. They told themselves they would return in a year when things settled. They did return, and whatever it was still there waiting for them. In 1923, Sergius Moonen and his girlfriend heard loud, deliberate whistling in the dark. Then they saw it. A large, hairy, upright figure moving along the beach, not crawling, not loping on all fours. Walking, watching them. In the hills above the bay, a miner kept a small operation where he dug for gold. One day he went up. He never came back. No sign of him was found. No body, no evidence of an accident, no indication of where he went. Simeon Kvasnikov of Port Graham carried this story for decades. In Alaska, men vanish into wilderness, but in Portlock, the vanishings did not stay isolated. They became a pattern. People had learned to read the warning signs. A foul, overwhelming smell arrived before any sighting, pushing through the trees ahead of whatever was coming. Hunters described it. Cannery workers described it, consistently enough that it was treated as a reliable alarm. You smelled it. Then you ran. For Malania Helen Kehl, Port Chatham was not a legend. It was the place of her birth. She came into the world on January 25, 1934, at a time when the village still functioned. Fishing boats on the water, smoke from chimneys, children running the same paths along the shore. She would grow up to become one of the last people capable of passing on first-hand family memory of what ended all of it. Her parents, John and Helen Romanoff, fled Port Chatham while she was still a baby. They left their house standing. They did not sell it, dismantle it, or arrange a proper departure. They fled. They started over in Nantiinaq on the beach with whatever they had carried out. The terror did not come from one event. It built over years. Incident by incident, body by body. Kehl described the Nantiinaq as a big, hairy creature. She also described something that stayed with every person who heard it. Along the cliffs above the bay, a large dark shape had been seen emerging from the rock face, moving low at first, then rising to its full height. In the fog and failing light, the pale coloring of its face stood out against the dark mass of its body. It would stand at the cliff edge, looking down over the village. Then it would disappear back into the rock. To those who saw it, this looked like the Nantiinaq surveying its territory. The high ground, the cliff faces, the sight lines down over everything below. Whether people understood it as spirit or as animal, the effect was the same. Something was watching, and it knew the land better than anyone who had built a life on it. In 1931, whatever had been moving through the margins of Portlock made direct contact. Malania Kehl recounted what happened to her godfather. He was working on a boat when something struck him over the head with a heavy winch. The blow killed him instantly. Other accounts named the victim as Andrew Kamluk, a logger, and described the weapon as a massive piece of mechanical equipment, the kind that took several men working together just to lift. The exact name shifts in the retelling. The central fact does not. A man was killed by a crushing strike that the people of Portlock could not assign to any person, and could not assign to any animal they knew. It was not claws. It was not teeth. Whatever did it had lifted something no single man could lift, and used it as a weapon. Fear had lived at the edge of the tree line for years. Now, something had crossed that line. In the years that followed, the accounts sharpened. Witnesses described a towering biped covered in dark hair, 8 to 10 feet tall. It left behind human-like tracks measuring 18 inches. No claw marks, just the deep plantigrade press of something built like a man, but far beyond any man's scale. It moved through terrain that stopped experienced hunters. It chose when to be seen. The name Nantiinaq carried across generations of Alutiiq oral history, translated as those who steal people. Older accounts described it as something ancient, older than the cannery, older than any of the settlements, something that had been in those woods long before anyone arrived to name it. Sally Ash preserved teachings passed down from her older relatives. The Nantiinaq could vanish behind trees. It could move through ground that left no trail a hunter could follow. It did not behave like frightened wildlife, and the accounts suggest it was not alone. Alongside reports of the large creature, witnesses described smaller figures, also bipedal, also covered in hair, moving through the woods in groups. They ran on 2 legs. They were fast. People called them little devils. Whether they were juveniles, a separate population, or something else entirely, their presence pointed to one thing. Something had been living in those woods for a long time. Tom Larson, a sawmill owner cutting wood for fish traps, saw the creature on the beach. He went back to his house for a gun. He returned to the shore. He did not fire. He never explained why. He did not have to. By the early 1940s, Portlock was losing people faster than it could absorb the losses. The census counted roughly 31 residents. The missing over the years numbered more. That is not a statistic anyone can verify cleanly. It is what the record suggests, and what the families who left carried with them. Men went into the hills to hunt and did not come back. Bodies, or what remained of them, began washing down from the mountain streams into the lagoon. Limbs shredded, torsos brutalized, some completely dismembered. The condition of what was found was the thing that stopped people from accepting the easy explanation. Bears maul, wolves tear. The people who found these remains had spent their lives around both. They knew the difference. What had been done here was different in force and in scope. The territorial marking was harder still to explain away. Trees were found ripped from the ground and driven back in upside down. Root balls exposed, trunks buried, not one, multiple, across different parts of the forest. Whatever left those markers was making a statement. Fish wheels were destroyed, camps harassed from beyond the firelight. The whistling returned from the darkness, slow, deliberate, the kind that does not sound accidental. People described a dread that hit before any sighting, a pressure in the chest, and the certainty of being watched from somewhere they could not locate. Whether it was instinct, terrain, or something stranger, it became part of the pattern. It arrived before the creature did, every time. Something had been running a campaign against this village, and it was working. Hunters tracking a moose through soft ground followed its prints into the high country. A second set of tracks appeared alongside, large, human-shaped, pressing deep into the earth. The two sets converged in an area of violent disturbance. Torn ground, broken brush. Then the moose tracks stopped. No blood trail, no drag marks. The moose was gone. The large bipedal prints continued upward toward the mountains, deeper with each step, as if carrying weight. A full-grown bull moose can weigh 1,400 pounds. The hunters who found those tracks understood what they were looking at. They left. Portlock did not decline. It evacuated. Families left houses standing, furniture inside, belongings in place. No auctions, no arranged handoffs. They went to Nantiinaq and Port Graham and started over on the beach with what they had carried out. The Nantiinaq, Kehl said, did not follow them there. By 1950, one man remained, the postmaster. He stayed because he believed the people would come back. He thought the fear would pass. Strange things continued happening in the empty settlement around him. In 1951, he left too. The cast-iron flywheel engine is still there, swallowed by vegetation, sitting where it was left, representing the kind of investment no economically motivated departure would have walked away from. You only leave behind equipment like that if getting out matters more than what you are leaving behind. The Nantiinaq did not leave when the last family did. In August 1973, 3 experienced bow hunters were pinned at Dogfish Bay Lagoon by weather. On the first night, one man woke the others, footsteps outside the tent, slow, heavy. The cadence was wrong for a bear. 2 feet. Measured steps circling the canvas before stopping at the door. They lay still. Morning came. They told themselves it was a moose, maybe a bear that found nothing and moved on. They were experienced men. They almost convinced themselves. The second night, they kept guns loaded and flashlights close. The steps came back. They looked. Nothing there. No movement, no tracks, just the dark and the trees, and the silence of something already gone. Third night they stayed awake and waited. Nothing came. When the weather broke, they left without finishing the hunt. Did staying inside that tent save their lives? In 1990, a paramedic transporting an elderly native man from Port Graham found the conversation turning to Dogfish Bay. The old man asked with sudden urgency whether it had bothered him, said his own brother had seen it, had been chased. 2 strangers, no need to define what they meant, they already knew. The warnings out of Nantiinaq were specific and had not changed across generations. Do not wander on foggy days. That is when he moves. Keep your distance. Do not corner him. Do not shoot, because you will not kill him anyway. Portlock did not invent this fear. In 1900, a prospector near Thomas Bay was rushed by creatures he described as nothing but devils until he reached the water and escaped by canoe. In 1920, Albert Petka near Nulato was attacked so severely by what locals called a bushman that he died of his injuries even after his dogs drove it off. In 1943, a man known locally as the Dutchman was mauled near a remote camp and died of internal injuries after reaching help. These cases do not prove each other. What they share is geography, consistency, and the same absence of a clean explanation. Port Chatham was not where this started. It was where it finally became impossible to stay. The earliest widely repeated printed account appeared in 1973. A traveler who anchored in the deserted bay after a storm wrote that people in English Bay and Port Graham still would not spend a night at Portlock. Still spoke of hunters, mutilated bodies, and giant tracks in the high country. That account predates the television era, the internet, and the modern Bigfoot industry. The story was already there, one village, one predator. One body of testimony carried across generations by the people who saw it, survived it, or inherited the warning from those who did. The machinery still sits in the brush at Port Chatham. The houses collapsed where they stood. The records went into boxes. The people never came back. So what do you call a place like that? A failed settlement? A mining outpost lost to time? Another Alaskan ghost town? Not if you listen to the families who fled it. They remembered the tracks. They remembered the bodies. They remembered the smell in the trees, the whistling in the dark. and the feeling that something above the bay was watching them from the high ground. Portlock did not die quietly, it was emptied. And whatever ruled those woods did not need to kill everyone to win, it only needed to make staying impossible. That is what the people of Port Chatham understood before anyone else did. The land was never empty, and something in those mountains was willing to prove it. To the families of Port Chatham, and to Malania Helen Kehl, and all those who carried this memory forward, you are in our thoughts and prayers. Like and subscribe to DeadNet Studios. Stay informed. Stay alive.
In the shadows of the digital night, we've wandered far and seen some sights, from haunting tales to eerie lights. DeadNet Studios where fear ignites. So long, farewell from the crimson hollows. We'll be back again with more tales to follow. Keep the lights dimmed and your curiosity high. For in DeadNet's realm, the spirits never die. We've danced with ghosts, chased legends on, through cryptic codes, stories untold. In cyberspace where mysteries unfold, our journey's been daring, brave and bold. So long, farewell from the darkened halls, where shadows whisper and the unknown calls. Keep your eyes wide and your mind astir, for the mysteries of DeadNet are a haunting blur. In the world of strange and the unexplained, we find our stories wildly untamed. With the trivial's end, we take a little rest. They find the shackles every best. So long, farewell from the crimson hollows. We'll be back again with more tales to follow. Keep the lights dimmed and your curiosity high. For in DeadNet's realm, the spirits never die.
We're trying a new ending format. Thank you for joining us for this video on Portlock, Alaska. If there's any videos you'd like to see next, let us know, and we'll be sure to make them. Have a great day.